All right, well, hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome. This lecture will be in English, as you probably figured. But please feel free to ask any questions in Dutch. Hello, welcome. I have Yvonne here that very nicely will help me with any Dutch questions. And ik kan een beetje Nederlands praten, so I can try as well. But we will have actually quite a lot of time for discussion. So please do not hold back from any questions. That's very likely. Okay. All right. So I would actually like to start this lecture by asking you guys a couple of questions. Okay. So first of all, how many of you have used ChatGPT before? Can I just see some hands up for people that have? Many of you, most of you, that doesn't surprise me. How many of you know what ChatGPT is? Not all the details, but more or less. You know what ChatGPT does, but really do not want to use it. Anyone? Can I see some hands up?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Does any one of you know what ChatGPT is? So more or less, you know how it's more or less used, but you don't want to use it. Like, I know what it does, but I don't want to have nothing to do with it. No? Okay. Okay. Very good. This is a good thing. I have one final question. How many of you, so the ones that have used ChatGPT before, hello, hi, welcome. How many of you that have used ChatGPT before, so the majority of you guys, how many of you were positively surprised by the outputs, by ChatGPT's answers? Yeah, that's what I thought. My name is Francesco Walker. I'm a cognitive psychologist, and I'm an assistant professor at Leiden University, and today I would like to tell you something about trust in AI and how this might affect our future use of AI as well. But before diving into all the details of this talk, just let me start by telling you a little bit what generative AI, generative artificial intelligence actually is, and how I actually got to investigate this topic. So, what is generative AI? Well, generative AI creates new data. And this is very different from traditional AI, because traditional artificial intelligence categorizes data. Generally doesn't create anything new. And categorizing data can be very useful for many different tasks. So, for example, detecting faces in images, but also recommending you specific products based on your past purchases with Amazon, with Alexa, for example. This is something that is done through traditional AI. Now, generative AI creates new information and creates new inputs that can be new outputs. That can be text outputs, it can be images, it can be music, and it can be videos. And the models that do this very well, and you might be familiar with some of these. Well, we have ChatGPT, of course, that is one of the most popular ones, but we also have Gemini by Google, just to mention others. When it comes to images, we have DALL-E. You might have seen, all these AI images. Many of these are generated through DALL-E. With music, we have JukeDeck, that was actually acquired by TikTok. So TikTok believes a lot in this technology. And then for videos, we have Runway. So large language models are a subset of generative AI. So when we talk about large language models, we are talking on a model focused on natural language processing, okay? So large language models are designed to generate and understand human-like language and human-like tasks. So, they're designed to answer questions, translating text, summarizing content, and holding conversations. And generally speaking, large language models, or LLMs in short, can perform these tasks pretty well. So, to summarize, all language models, all LLMs are generative AI, but not all generative AI are LLMs. So when we talk about the AI images generated with DALL-E, just to give you an example, this has nothing to do with LLMs, okay? LLMs are really focused on language. And today, I would really like to focus a little bit more on LLMs with you. And I mean, when we talk about LLMs, when we talk about large language models, this is a topic that, in a way or in another, many of you will have heard before. So, when ChatGPT was first introduced in November 2022, so it's about 2 years ago, everything changed. We had in our hands this revolutionary tool. And, as with all revolutions, with all transformative technology, we started getting very concerned about how this would shape our society. And, this is not weird. I mean, this is something, without giving you too much of a history lesson, this is something that transformative technology has always done. So, transformative technology is called transformative because it doesn't just add something to something that we already have, but it really transforms it. It transforms the people living that society, but it also transforms the society as a whole. I mean, think about the light bulb, transformative technology, electricity. Think about the first cars, transformative technology. Think about social media, transformative technology, right? And I mean, do you think that all these changes, all this technology was taken lightly by society? And I mean, no, absolutely not. Just to give you another example, during the Industrial Revolution, when machinery was introduced, when textile machinery was introduced, the Luddites were formed. And the Luddites were a group of workers whose main goal, whose main objective was to destroy all textile machinery. They wanted to destroy all textile machinery because they were really concerned about losing their job, very simply. And I mean, although it is certain, it is sure that in the short term people have lost their jobs, many jobs also transformed. And of course, the Industrial Revolution led to important and in many cases also beneficial changes in our society. But when we talk about transformative technology and how this changes society, we don't need to go all the way back to the Industrial Revolution. Think about the internet. When the World Wide Web was first introduced to the general public in the early 90s, the World Wide Web existed before, but the moment in which we really started using it was in the early 90s. Well, people had many concerns, many valid concerns actually, that still persist today. They were concerned about job loss, of course. They were concerned about they were concerned about misinformation as well, and they were concerned about privacy issues. All topics that are very, very valid today. Now, one important thing to understand about transformative technology is that policies are always put in place by governments, to protect society. But even if policies are put in place, what we know about that technology and the way in which that technology behaves strongly affects our trust towards that technology. And that also means that it strongly affects the way in which we will interact with that technology. So we're talking about trust. Trust affects the way in which we interact with technology. And you see, in the last decade, I've been in the very lucky position to study trust towards a truly revolutionary technology that is supposed to change future generations. I study trust towards automated driving technology, self-driving cars, in short. This was the main topic of my PhD, and questions such as, should we trust self-driving cars? Should we trust Teslas? What does autopilot mean? What about the accidents? Electric vehicles, are they a good thing? Are they a bad thing? These are all questions that I still get a lot during my work, and I can assure you that the answers to many of these questions are very, very far from simple. But I mean, I really love investigating this topic. Honestly, I still do it a lot today. And 3 years ago, when I started working as an assistant professor here at Leiden University, I had the chance to start my own lab, the HEL lab, and investigating how humans interact with automated driving technology is still a very, very big part of my work, of my job. So my research group investigates how humans interact with art and technology. We also collaborate with a lot of museums. But today I won't tell you much about art, unfortunately, but technology will definitely be a key theme of this lecture today. Now, I had all this knowledge, I still have all this knowledge about how we interact with automated vehicles, right? And once that LLMs started becoming popular and people started, freaking out a little bit, well, what does this mean? What does this mean for students, for people? I thought, can I use all this knowledge that I have about trust in self-driving cars? Can a lot of this be moved to LLMs as well? Because you see, when it comes to transformative technology, the technology changes, but a lot of our fears, a lot of our biases, a lot of our expectations influence our behavior in the same way. At least I'm a strong believer of that. And so I started studying trust in LLMs. And the beautiful thing about trust is that we all have a general idea about what it is, because we trust people. Trust is a interpersonal concept. It's when we talk about trust, we're generally talking about interactions between people and not about technology. But when we talk about trust in automated technology, what are we actually referring to? Well, we can define trust as the attitude that an agent will help achieve an individual's goals in a situation characterized by uncertainty and vulnerability. And this is actually a definition that was provided by Lee and C in 2004. Lee and C that wrote this really important paper that today is considered the real starting point, the real paper that you're supposed to read if you're interested in trust and technology. And it's actually funny because John Lee was also in my PhD defense, and when they first wrote this paper, I mean, they had no idea that it would become, this key thing, this thing that everyone keeps citing. But sometimes we write things, we publish things, they get 1-2 citations for like 10 years, and then suddenly it becomes such an important topic that it starts booming and everyone starts referencing it. Now, in this definition, there are 2 key terms that you really need to take into account: uncertainty and vulnerability. Trust always takes place in a situation characterized by uncertainty and vulnerability. And if you think about it, this is the same for humans as it is for technology. So, if you ask a friend to pick you up from the airport, there is always a chance that that friend will let you down, and that is uncertainty. Now, if a friend does let you down, you'll have a problem. Maybe you'll have no idea how to get home, and that is vulnerability. You'll have a real problem. And the same applies to technology as well. Let's take an example of the train. Okay, if you want to take a train, there is always a chance that that train will be delayed. And actually, when we're talking about NS, lately that chance can be quite high, and that is uncertainty. And if your train is delayed, then you will be late for your appointment. Okay, and that is vulnerability. And one thing that I really want to emphasize is that this is very different from your relationship with your microwave, for example, okay? Because with your microwave, random technological example, but with your microwave, although there is a chance that your microwave is not going to work, so there is uncertainty, there is vulnerability, but in your mental model of how the microwave works, you're not taking that possibility into account. So there isn't a real uncertainty. You know, when you start the microwave, you have no doubts that it's going to work. So in this case, we're not talking about trust, we're talking about acceptance. You've already accepted that the microwave in that specific way is going to work. And even if it doesn't, then what's the worst thing that can happen? Your meal isn't warm. So again, also not real vulnerability. So when we talk about trust, it's always a situation characterized by uncertainty and vulnerability. Now, there are a couple of other important things to take into account when we're talking about trust in technology. So first of all, trust is not a unidimensional construct. And this means that trust is not present or absent, okay? But it fluctuates along the spectrum depending on a vast array of factors that can be our predispositions towards a system, dispositional factors, age, gender, but also our actual expectations. Our actual expectations and also the actual situation, the actual task that we want to perform. And this brings me to the next point of this slide. Trust is situation specific or task specific if we're talking about LLMs. And what does this mean? This simply means that you will trust a system, a model, you will trust AI to perform certain tasks rather than others. So, for example, if we're talking about ChatGPT, you might trust ChatGPT to summarize a specific piece of text, or you might ask it to simplify information that you find very complicated. But you might not trust ChatGPT to give you medical advice or legal advice. So your trust can but that's a good thing. Please don't trust ChatGPT with legal and medical advice. But again, trust can change depending on the kind of task that you want to perform. Finally, yes, please.
Maybe you ran too fast over your definition.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't make it a problem, because I think it is not a great definition.
The definition of trust, we can go back to it. The attitude that an agent will help achieve an individual's goals in a situation characterized by uncertainty and vulnerability.
I think that the agent just believes that it will help. It is not true, maybe.
The agent, as in the user, the person that is using the AI. That is a very good point.
But he believes that it will help.
Very good point. Very good point. I'm going to answer to your question in two ways. First of all, when this definition was introduced, LLMs were very far from being a reality. Okay? Here we're talking about a definition of trust in automation or trust in technology, if you want. But I believe can be applied to LLMs, but this is not a definition of trust in LLMs. Okay? First of all, just a small clarification. Secondly, you stress the user might believe that it's useful, but LLMs are not always useful. Now, I think that in a way, this is a little bit the core of this lecture, because what I would like to bring forward in the next couple of slides is that it is true. LLMs are not always useful. There's a lot of risk of over trusting it and using it when it provides unreliable information. But in many situations, LLM do a lot of things in a very, very, very good way. And if we use it properly, taking advantage of those situations, then actually using LLMs can be a very good thing. And that is my point of view, but I hope we can get a little bit on the same page in the next couple of slides and see how we can continue this discussion. But thank you very much for your question. And actually, please feel free to bring any questions forward. We will have plenty of time for questions even at the end of this talk, but I'm always happy to have a very interactive discussion with you. Yes?
Yeah, since you invited us.
Yes.
Harari, in his last book, Nexus, states actually that AI is becoming an actor. So it is becoming a subject in a social environment. How would that change that definition?
Oh, we start with difficult questions. Okay. Well, let me ask you, do you think that AI being an actor, meaning being more and more integrated into our social environment, do you think it changes this definition?
Yes.
In what way?
I do think so. Well, you mentioned the word overtrusting. I think we do overtrust automated systems because we have a binary perception of what they are producing. Whilst when it relates to humans or actors in that particular matter, we expect those actors to have biases, prejudices, and the like. So I think it would make a difference when it would become a fully integrated actor in a social environment that actually we would trust it less. And at least it's a speculation. But
Yeah. And all we can do is speculate at this point, right? So that's also, I think, the interesting point of this topic. I really like your point of view, and you're actually emphasizing one fundamental difference between humans and technology. Because with technology, we're talking about performance. With humans, we're talking about behavior. And those two things are not per se the same thing. But now, with that being said, the way in which we interact with humans, and I want to make sure to not tell you things that then will come later in the slides, but the way in which we interact with humans can actually be extremely similar to the way in which we interact with people as well. So, I can imagine, and again, I'm going to speculate as well, but remember, and I think this is the most important thing of this definition, trust refers to a situation characterized by uncertainty and vulnerability. So for this definition truly to change, when we're talking about AI, it means that there shouldn't be uncertainty and vulnerability. If we reach a certain point in which we think, okay, whatever AI does, whatever we ask LLMs, we can be literally 100% sure that, the answer is reliable, then I'm with you. Then, there's no uncertainty, and there is still a lot of vulnerability in the sense that this will change the way in which we work in ways that we can't even think right now. So vulnerability is still there, but uncertainty would definitely shift. Now, will this ever be possible? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. Maybe the early future will actually tell us. A very, very interesting question. Thanks. Yes.
I also have a question because this layout is more focusing on an individual than the total spectrum of all people, because one can find a situation uncertain and the other one can find it pretty certain, right? But both, if they're both using, for example, a technology that gives them the same reply and the same outcome, subjectively people can feel it different, right?
Definitely, 100%. You're 100% correct, and that's also why we talk about overtrust and undertrust. And we will get to that in the next slides. But there is certain information provided by the technology, again, all technologies, but let's talk about LLMs right now. The information provided can be more or less reliable. And you as an individual can decide to rely on that unreliable information or not. So of course there are a million individual differences that we can put in there. And in some cases, you might undertrust the technology in situations in which you should trust it. And in other cases, you will overtrust the technology in, in situations in which you really shouldn't. So what we really should try to achieve as a society is balance between these two things. We need to achieve trust calibration. We need to align the trust of the user with the actual reliability of the system. And when we're talking about transformative technology, I mean, the individual is very important, but at the end, what transformative technology does is really change society, right? So more about the individual differences that, of course, are extremely important, but we need to see how the general population as a whole actually interacts and behaves in response to the answers of these models. But we will definitely get much further on this topic. Okay, where were we? Naria, yes, we did this. Okay, yes. The final important, let's say, background information that I wanted to give you about trust in technology is that trust is actually not all the same, okay? But we can actually distinguish between two fundamental trust layers, and that is initial learned trust and dynamic learned trust. And well, give me the chance to explain these two levels a little bit more in detail and see how they can actually affect our interaction with LLMs. So actually last year, I'm sorry, this is a lot of information, but I will guide you through it. You don't need to read all of it. But last year, I put together a model to try to clarify how trust affects our interaction with self-driving cars, okay? But actually what I believe is that this model that I initially developed for that purpose can be perfectly applied to the way in which we interact with LLMs as well. So I slightly adapted the original model. And what we do is we start with an initial mental model of the LLM's behavior. And this initial mental model is influenced by many different factors, okay? It's influenced by dispositional factors, that can be our age, for example. It's influenced by the reputation of the system, but it's also influenced by a priori information. So meaning that it's influenced by what you know about the system, in the sense that what kind of information you received from friends, colleagues, from the TV, all this affects our initial mental model, affects our initial expectations towards large language models. And this determines our initial learned trust before any interaction with the system has taken place, okay? This is before you've used ChatGPT. Now, dynamic learned trust, conversely, is continuously influenced by our interactions with the system. So, we use ChatGPT for many different tasks. We ask him many different various questions. And by asking these questions, we get different answers. And based on these answers, we adjust our mental model of the LLM's behavior. And by adjusting this mental model, we continuously update our dynamic learned trust. Okay? So if I would ask you, do you trust ChatGPT? And you tell me, no, absolutely not, but you've never used it before, then we're talking about initial learned trust. But if you tell me, well, yeah, I trust it for some tasks rather than others because I've used it and I was convinced about that, but not about this other response, then we're talking about dynamic learned trust. And understanding these two levels can be important to really see what we're talking about and how also we wanna measure trust towards this technology. So to give you, yes. So I was getting ahead of myself. So one crucial mistake or one crucial misconception when it comes to trust in technology and trust in LLMs is that we should always try to improve the trust of the user, okay? And the word improve is extremely misleading because it seems to suggest that we always want to increase the trust of the user. But what we actually know as a fact is that too much trust can really lead to very, very dangerous situations, okay? So just to give you a couple of examples, too much trust is what's behind many of the deadly accidents involving Tesla's autopilot. So, even though Tesla gives you the chance to take your hands off the steering wheel from time to time, you definitely should not start napping in a Tesla. I mean, we're still actually very far from that situation. I would strongly discourage you to try this out. But the same applies to LLMs as well. Too much trust is also what's behind, or one of the factors that is behind students, asking ChatGPT to completely write their reports. Not worrying, not taking into account how this will affect their entire learning journey. So in some cases, we trust the transformative technology in situations in which we shouldn't. And this is known as overtrust, okay? However, and this is a very important however that I always want to stress, there are situations in which we can trust the technology and we just don't, okay? Let me give you a couple of examples. This happens when we don't want to use cruise control in our car for whatever reason. My mom never wanted to use cruise control. It's like, I don't trust it, I don't know. But cruise control is a technology that we had for years. It's very safe, and it can, in most situations, it can really make our life, our trip, a lot more comfortable. Cruise control, not adaptive cruise control. Then we go in a different realm. Cruise control, okay? The same applies to ChatGPT as well. When you, for example, when you have a very complex topic and ChatGPT can narrow it down for you and make it more simple, but you don't want to use it for that purpose. So in many cases, we don't trust technology in situations in which we could, in situations in which we should. And this is known as undertrust. Now, what we want to do is that we want to avoid this, right? We want to avoid overtrust. We want to avoid undertrust. We need balance between these two things. So what we need to do is we need to align the trust of the user with the actual capabilities of the system. And this is known as trust calibration. Now, problem is that we have no idea how to achieve this. No idea. Zero. Literally zero. And I mean, the idea is very simple, okay? You're like, okay, we have trust, you have system performance, let's just align it. But questions such as, what are we actually aligning? Are we aligning what kind of behavior? And how would we even measure that this alignment is taking place? And now you see, last year, I actually put together a team of some of the major experts in the world studying trust in automated vehicles, okay? And we decided to write together this fundamental paper, and the goal of this paper was to, clarify some of these points. What is trust? Trust calibration, can we achieve it? How do we measure it? And I swear, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. Like, collaborating with these people was very difficult. And the problem is that even agreeing on basic things such as, what is trust? You say, I mean, I can explain it to you, I can give you a definition, but if we start diving into it, I mean, it becomes quite complicated. So my point with this slide is that we try to answer a lot of questions, but there are still a lot of questions that still need to be answered when it comes to trust, when it comes to how trust affects the use of technology.
But there's
Please.
not a general social, psychological concept of trust that could apply to this situation?
Good question. Well, so trust, of course, comes from, trust in technology is a concept that we borrow from interpersonal trust. So we talk about trust towards people, the problem really when it comes to technology, or one of the problems, not the problem, one of the problems is that it's very hard to figure out what you're measuring, because trust is a psychological concept, and what we usually measure is not really trust, it's reliance, that is behavior of the user. And I must admit that then we get a little bit lost in psychological terms, and I don't really like that, because I always think that when we're talking about interaction with technology, we can say, okay, this is trust, this is reliance, what are we measuring? Without getting too much in a too long of a discussion, but my bottom line is that important? Is it important to make that distinction? I don't know, but it's different. I mean, when it comes to interpersonal trust, we have a lot of research focusing on, the various, trust experiments linked to how social users work. But with technology, we're not per se talking about a social user. There are a lot of things in common, but we need to take into account how performance will affect this relationship. So bottom line is, yes, we can rely a lot on the literature that already exists on interpersonal trust. We can also rely on the million studies that now exist when it comes to trust in technology as well. But when it comes to trust calibration, to actually align it, that becomes a problem. Defining it, okay, we can get that far, but actually, implementing, for example, in a vehicle, a system that would tell you, okay, your trust is misaligned now, stop doing what you're doing, that's very difficult. Okay? I could talk about this for hours, but all right, so now with this being said, I want to keep an eye on the time as well, because I want to give you a break at a certain point. With this being said, when it comes to the use of LLMs, when it really comes to ChatGPT, how do users really use ChatGPT? Okay, and I'm particularly interested in one group of users. I'm particularly interested in students, because I teach. I love my students, and I wanna know what they do with the system. And when ChatGPT was introduced, universities went completely crazy. Okay, I mean, including ours. I mean, universities were extremely concerned about how students would start using this technology. And today, if we search in the news, we find many articles, just stressing the risks that students are facing in using ChatGPT. So, in the last couple of years, we made so many efforts in trying to stop students using ChatGPT. We developed AI checks, and AI checks are a little bit like plagiarism checks, but instead of detecting plagiarism, they detect AI. Are you actually using AI to write this report? Now, problem is that very soon after these checks were developed, we had to stop using them because they simply don't work. Okay, so it's just that we're leading to so many false positives. It's just ChatGPT is based on natural language processing, right? That's what it does. So detecting if this is AI generated or not, it's just too much of a hard task. So we stopped using all the AI checks. Now, my point here is that we focused so much on the risks faced by students that we actually forgot, or we underestimated the opportunities that come with ChatGPT for students. Okay, yes, please.
A few decades ago, the same discussion was on using calculators at school.
And where did that lead us today? Yeah, I think, and thank you for bringing forward that example, because I think it's an extremely well-suited example. So it's yes.
But it appears that kids are less good at arithmetic
because
hand.
of calculators.
Because of calculators. They can't add 2 to 2.
Yeah. I mean, without going too much into details in this, but I mean, that also shows how technology then is supposed to change our teaching as well. We're supposed to adapt our teaching, keeping these things in mind. So, of course, the calculator leads to new opportunities, right? So, no one would ask you right now to, perform extremely complicated calculations without using the calculator. But if we know, as teachers, if we know that then, the calculator opens this opportunity, we need to take this into account when we develop our teaching, because there are learning goals change. There are certain things, like such as really complex calculus, that we're not going to teach anymore. Let me give you another example. Statistics, okay? I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with statistics, but back in the days, way before I started studying statistics, but ANOVAs were done by hand. So, basic statistics was all done by hand. Now, me included, I would have no idea how to run an ANOVA by hand. No idea. So, we have software to do it. So this is to say that, of course, pros and cons with everything, right? So, but the important thing is that as teachers, as educators, we adapt to technology. We can't just ignore that this technology is there, and this technology is there to stay. We're not suddenly going to say, hey, you know what, guys? I mean, kids are doing really bad with maths. We're going to ban calculators. So we're never going to use them because this is just not going to happen. So we need to embrace technology, not only from a point of view of the risks that come with it. We need to, there are risks, but we also need to emphasize the opportunities that come with it. Now, with this being said, how do students actually use ChatGPT? And you see, answering this question is actually very, very difficult, because most of the reports, most of the investigations that are out there focus on instructors. So, for example, how can we implement ChatGPT for our assignments, rather than focusing on the students. But students are key stakeholders, and we know that as a fact. Well, they use ChatGPT, we know that as a fact, but we also know that they would like to implement ChatGPT in their educational path. Now, luckily enough, a recent review, 2024, by Ansari and colleagues, tried to categorize the use that students do with ChatGPT in 3 main categories. And Ansari states, students use ChatGPT for operationalizing their learning. They use it as a writing assistant, and they use it for adaptive learning. Now, in the next couple of slides, we will dive a little bit deeper into these 3 concepts, and we will see how they link to trust, how they link to behavior. But before doing this, I suggest we take a 10-minute break,